Hello, everyone. I'm Erik D'Souza, and you're joining us today for another episode of Crime Writers of Canada's podcast. We are pretty much halfway through the series of interviewing members of Crime Writers of Canada who have been nominated for an Awards of Excellence. It is my pleasure today to introduce you to Tamara L. Miller. Hi, Tamara. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me today.
It is always fun for me to do this because A, I get to kind of catch up with my old friends, but B, I get to make new friends. So, Tamara, this is the first time you and I are chatting. And the reason why we are chatting is because your novel, Into the Fall by Thomas and Mercer, was nominated for the Peter Robinson Award for Best Crime Novel. So, congratulations on that.
Thank you. I am unbelievably honored to be in the field that I'm in. And when I looked at the list of other nominees, I was just blown away by the talent on that list. I feel like I kind of snuck in somehow.
I feel you keep good company now. So, a little bit about you. Tamara L. Miller writes psychological suspense steeped in atmosphere, emotional complexity, and the starky beauty of the Canadian wilderness. Her debut novel, Into the Fall, was a 2025 Amazon First Reads selection. Her second novel, The Weight of Glass, follows a daughter's perilous search for answers after the mother's disappearance along the snowbound shores of Lake Superior. She is unbelievably honored and humbled that Into the Fall has been shortlisted for the Crime Writers of Canada's Best Novel for 2026. Tamara holds a PhD in Canadian history and draws on a lifelong love of the wilder places in her writing. She lives in Ottawa, Canada. Um, well, let's start from the beginning. I read that the inspiration for this novel was pulled from your own experience of camping with your family in Ontario. So, can you tell us a little bit about how your story began?
Sure. I mean, like many writers, a lifelong reader. And I've always had a book in my hand, always thinking about plots. Never really imagined that I would write my own book, except for in some weird pipe dream off in the future, maybe. And then I was on a canoe camping trip in Ontario here. And it was with my family. My kids were little at the time. They're much older now. And I woke up early, and it was just one of those beautiful mornings where the lake was calm. There was just a slight breeze. It was already warm. It just one of those wonderful, magical Canadian Shield moments that sort of makes you feel very Canadian and very, thrilled with where you are. But then I started thinking about how would I get myself out of this situation if I was alone, or if my husband suddenly wasn't there. And it struck me as the beginning of an amazing story. If you were abandoned in the wilderness with two kids, how would you get out? How would you survive? How would you get help? And more importantly, how would you find your missing husband uh, in this dense forest, particularly when you canoe camp in? There's no paths, there's no ranger's office nearby. So it just started brewing in my head, and it sat in my head, and it grew almost like this. I don't know, amorphous thing in the back of my mind that I kept coming back to again and again and again. So when I finally had time in my life to start thinking about writing, I came back to this story and I started just, little bits here and there. Um, it took me a number of years to complete an actual manuscript. And then, a couple more years to actually polish it to where it needed to be. Um, but all that experience just fed into it, all this love and terror that I have of the wilderness. It became such a perfect setting for the novel and for the family dynamics and how they can be torn apart when you're faced with difficult situations.
Yeah, we discussed this before. We're sort of playing a careful game with our audience today. I've read the book; it's brilliant, and I don't want to say too much, so I'm leaving it to you, and I'm not asking too many follow-up questions. One thing us authors do, especially first-time authors, is we stick to our own lives almost as much as we can. Know what you or write what you know. the oldest adage for every new writer. Sarah Anderson seemed to be, in the point of a book at least, around the same demographic as you. How much of her, or rather, how much of you is in her?
It's funny you say that because I've had a number of readers who have come up to me, particularly people in my demographic, who have said to me that they completely identified with the challenges that Sarah was going through with her marriage, with her kids, with trying to juggle everything all at once. So while it was definitely writing what I know, I also think it's such a common touchstone, particularly for moms, I would say, because they're the readers who have approached me most about this, that it felt very familiar to a number of women who are in that situation, who are trying to manage everything, but also maintain the appearance of managing everything, even while something might be crumbling. The good news is my husband is still alive, so we don't have to worry about that. I did not lose him in the wilderness, and he is still with me. So there's my story diverges from Sarah's then. But the struggle that Sarah has with trying to find who she is, trying to be all things to all people in her life, and as a result, letting some slip away. For example, readers will learn that Sarah reconnects with an estranged sister, one of the people in her life that she let slip away as she was trying to manage where her future was going. And putting, I think, where I identify a great deal with Sarah is being in the wilderness and being in complete awe of where I am, but also always feeling like there's something not safe in the wilderness. And that image, that dynamic, that emotion is something that most of us carry through in our life, even our day to day life, even when we're comfortably ensconced in suburbia. We can feel like everything is fine, but there's always these terrors on the margins. These days, it can be the news. It could be, as a mom, your kid accidentally runs in front of a car. There's always something that has us terrified. And so I think that I really drew on my own experiences and my own feelings, which I think I sort of poured into the novel maybe more than I should have.
When I was doing my homework, I learned that you, I guess, started your career in the government. So you have a PhD in history, as we mentioned, Canadian history, and worked several years in government writing policy. It's sort of a, it's not far to say that you've written a lot. This isn't the first time you picked up a pen and decided to write, but
Yeah,
academia and policy writing is maybe the opposite, polar opposite of crime writing. So
very
how did
true.
the process, was it just like waking up one day and I'm going to be a writer, or was it a long process?
It was a long process. I think, through various stages of my writing life, if you will, being in academia and then sort of transitioning into government, both very different writing styles. And I think I borrowed from academia and from my government work in terms of writing concise, writing, very uh, clear, direct. At least again, I tried. Having said that, the first thing I figured out when I started to think about maybe writing fiction was that I didn't know anything about writing fiction. And so it was a journey. I started really exploring what was fiction about, how was it different, and the way to do that for me anyway was to reach out to community. And I'm very lucky that Ottawa has a very vibrant writing community, and so I was able to connect with various organizations, various workshops. I connected with some mentors. I worked through piece after piece after piece. And I think, like many writers, I started by thinking I was going to write short stories because they're smaller, they're manageable, they seemed more something more attainable than an actual novel. And in the process, I definitely learned that there's a bit of an art to short stories, and there's a talent to short stories. not everybody has that talent, and I am one of them. I struggled with the short story. It is a beautiful form, but it takes a particular approach and a particular talent that I found myself not being able to live in, and that's when I realized that I like longer stories. I like my characters to develop over a longer period, not necessarily in terms of your timeline, but in terms of the amount of time that I spend with them, and I grow and develop with them, which is something that I found I wasn't attaining with a short story uh, in the same way I could with a novel. So I started working after about a couple years of literally taking workshops and meeting with mentors and having critiques done. I started thinking about the novel and how I would sketch that out, and then that's what sort of led to where I wanted to go. And even then, after I had a manuscript, I workshopped that thing to death. I revised it to death. I like many writers, revise, revise, revise. I stopped counting the number of revisions I did because it was starting to get a little depressing to see how many times I could keep rewriting this thing. It was only, actually, to be honest, when my son, who was probably 12 at the time, actually read the manuscript cover to cover, and he was not really interested in that type of writing, but he read it cover to cover. I thought, okay, maybe now I have something that will connect with readers. And that process took me about 5 years to sort of really work through all those machinations and feel like I had an understanding of how to write fiction.
Well, you did a good job because it's definitely polished and it's definitely
Thank
um uh I don't know what you call it, concise. Because I find it, I don't know, odd or funny that you don't consider yourself a short story writer, and I understand cutting it down that short is difficult, and I would agree with you for myself too.
you.
But one of the skills that short story writers have is the ability to conserve every word. So it's very stripped down. At the same time, right in your description, and I agree with it, you say you write suspense steeped in atmosphere. So how do you write steeped in atmosphere, which often takes time, in a page or two, and but also keep the pace going so that a 12-year-old son isn't going to drop it right away?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many tricks that you pick up along the way. And for me, it was really in the revision. And somewhere along the way, um, I remember reading a craft book, or it might have been in a workshop. I can't even remember where I got it from now. It's been a while, but that you start by looking at the entirety of the manuscript, and then you look at the entirety of the page, and then you look at the entirety of the paragraph, the sentence, the word. You break it down bit by bit by bit, and you ask yourself, is this needed? Does this create the atmosphere you want? And that trick was something that I took again and again in all these revisions. And so I found that I learned a little bit. I think your impulse as a writer is to try and give as much color, as much atmosphere in terms of letting the reader sit in the environment you're in. But to me, it was always about choosing the right one. I could tell you six different things about, the way the water is lapping on the side of the rock. But what is the one that is going to make you feel it? What is the one that is going to make you really sit there and understand it? And how do you engage all the senses? And you don't necessarily have to engage all the senses for every single scene, but finding that key one that strikes the tone that you want. For me, it was a little bit easier, I found, because in the wilderness, there's just so many sights, so many sounds, so many smells, so many everything that you could tap into in a way that could create atmosphere. Because atmosphere and the wilderness is, people love it and they're a little bit afraid of it. So it really gave me a bit of a cheat code, if you will, into creating that atmosphere.
You have a new book out. I think it just recently came out, The Weight of Glass. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. It's In the same genre, this one is the story of Emma Meadows, who lives with her husband and university-age daughter in a small town along the northern shores of Lake Superior. It is an area steeped in history, but also very much vulnerable to the whims of nature and the lake that sort of dominates everything about the area. Um, the story starts off on Christmas morning when a mysterious package of a beautiful music box arrives. Emma's daughter, Jaden, is home for the holidays. And as the family gathers, Emma disappears, leaving behind nothing but the music box. And Jaden becomes obsessed with the box and finding out what lays behind her mother's disappearance, even though everyone else is telling her that her mother just left, like many overworked, tired moms do. So it's similar genres, similar psychological drama as Into the Fall, but just throw in the winter to kick things up a notch.
Just to add another layer to a
Exactly.
Canadian winter. Just very quick follow up. How long did it take you to write this one?
This one took a lot less time. I was lucky enough to have gotten a two-book contract with my publisher. And so, whereas the first one, I had all the time in the world to work away at it, this one had a deadline. And a very patient publisher when I took a couple months more than originally expected. But it took me about 2 years to complete.
Excellent. If people were looking for you on social media, I know with the name like Tara Miller, you're not going to get taramiller.com. So where would people find you?
It's by tamaramiller.com.
And when we say buy, it's BY.
Yeah, by tamaramiller.com. Yeah.
And big on social media?
I'm on Instagram. It's at TL Miller 2018. And that's my main source. That's where I spend most of my social media time.
Excellent. So thank you for taking the time out to speak to us today. I tell everyone I knew the short list months in advance or a month in advance. I don't know the winner. So, so Tamara, I can honestly wish you good luck.
Well, when you're in a category with Louise Penny, you hope for the best, but come on, she blows people away with her writing. So
I'm not going to disagree with you because she blows me away too. So
exactly.
congratulations.
All right. Thank you so much, and thank you for the interview.